Hello YouTube, I'm going to be doing a project today that's completely different from anything that I've done before. It's going to be using this little glass pot, and my plan is to make a tiny little aquarium, and I'm going to use resin for the first time as well, which I'm quite looking forward to. So I've got all my sculpting tools here, a pair of wire cutters, a pair of small pliers, got some wire if I need it, got this Tamiya craft saw which is always useful, and yeah, the aluminium wire is just this really soft, thin stuff. Whether I'll use it or not, I don't know, but it's nice to sort of have it there in case I do. Got some small cable ties as well, just in case, and some super glue, and also some Milliput, which is what I'm going to be doing all my sculpting with. So I'm going to make all the little corals and things. I'm going to do a little coral reef using this Milliput. If you haven't used Milliput before, it's a two-part putty. You mix these two parts together in equal amounts, and then it sets rock hard at room temperature in about 4 hours. You don't have to mix the whole pack of both colours at the same time. You can just break off a little bit and mix small amounts, as long as they're equal amounts of each. Here I've got some bamboo skewers and yeah, the rest of my sculpting tools, which are mainly kind of ball styluses and some little sharp implements as well. So I'm making this for my wife's birthday because she loves kind of scuba diving. We did a bit of scuba diving in Australia, and she has like her favourite fish and things like that, some of which I'm going to make and add into this tank as well. Right, these pieces were made by pressing Milliput into cork bark to get that kind of texture. It looks quite rock-like, and I think I'll paint those up so they look like little rocks. Then I've made loads of little corals, so you've got branching corals like this. I've made more sort of like pillow or cushion shaped corals as well, and then I've done like little tiny horn corals, that kind of thing. But these will all be painted up in really nice bright vivid colours, and then it's just going to be how I kind of glue them all in place so they're all crammed into that little glass cube. Whenever I'm making like movie creatures and things like that, I tend to want to make them quite big. And my wife is always like, make it smaller, we haven't got enough space. So I'm trying to make this like on this little mini scale. And I do really enjoy working on this scale as well, like trying to make things nice and tiny. But we'll see how it goes. It's just something a little bit different as well for me. And I'm really looking forward to trying the resin because I've never done that before. Some of these corals were simple to make, where you just, make a sort of a dome shape and then press into it with a ball stylus to get those little holes. Some like this were kind of little balls and things that I had left over from other projects that I just pushed the balls down into a lump of milliput, and that gave a really nice kind of coral texture. Some of the corals, I don't know if they exist in nature, but it works quite well. A couple of little starfish here, you got that one, and then this is brittle star, which is still on the bit of foil because it hasn't dried yet, and I don't want those little arms to snap off, so I've left that until it's fully dried. Yeah, a lot of these other little corals or like anemone type things I've got. These were quite cool to make as well. Again, quite simple really, but just using a ball stylus over and over again to get that really nice texture. That should show up really well when it's painted a bright colour as well. So as well as pushing like just hardened milliput balls into some soft milliput, I did this as well, which is where I've taken some balls that were still soft and I've pushed it onto a soft mound of milliput, and that worked really well. This one I did exactly the same process, but then I used a ball stylus, if I can get it to focus. I used a ball stylus just to push holes in it as well. So it's like a sort of a combination of the two techniques, but that gives a really nice effect too. And then I've just done these, which is just like making a flat, thin ribbon of milliput and then just kind of crinkling the edges in. Again, reasonably simple to make, but it gives a really effective kind of shape. It really looks like a little coral. And I did a few spirally bits as well. I don't know if I'll add those or not. I don't know if they look enough like corals, but yeah, we'll see. And then this one, just kind of like making long kind of lumps of milliput and attaching them in. But that again gives another different texture. I think with this sort of thing, the more textures you can make, the better. and then it'll be really fun sort of deciding on the colours to use. Yeah, these spirals, I just sort of made them, but I don't think they look enough like real coral, so I'll probably leave those. These are pretty cool. This was actually a whole load of thin pointy teeth that I'd made for creatures, and I just had in a little tub somewhere. I just pushed those into some soft milliput, and they really do look like little corals as well, and I can have fish swimming sort of in between those. Right, this is after the first stage where I painted the rocks black and a very dark grey dry brushed onto them, and then I've just painted up a whole load of corals, and I'm just working gradually. I'm putting in like the bigger corals first, really, sticking those in place just with super glue, and you can see it's already looking pretty cool, pretty nice and bright. And then I add like other colours into this, like pinks and things as well, and purples, and that should end up looking like really quite cool, I think. I'm already pleased with how it's looking. Slightly nervous about adding the resin, and whether or not that will wreck the whole thing. I don't know, but I think it's got to be worth the risk. I've got to bite the bullet and try resin at some point. Because I make a lot of movie creatures and things, I've always fancied the idea of making, tall glass jars that look like kind of taxidermy exhibits, and having some creepy creatures in there with resin in as well. So I'll probably do that at some point. Right, you can see in here, this is the next stage with even more corals added. It's really good fun just putting a blob of super glue in and then adding an extra coral one at a time, and it just builds and builds, and you can see with the various colours added, it starts looking, much more like a natural coral reef. A lot of these aren't to scale or anything, it's just for the overall effect, and that's what's quite nice about this. You don't necessarily have to go from any photographs or anything as reference, you can just make it all up, and it looks really cool anyway. With the resin, I'm hoping to give it a slightly bluey greeny tint to it as well. So I'm thinking about that as I'm adding these colours, what it's going to look like, hopefully. So for the fish, I think I'm going to add a little clownfish. I also like the idea of making a tiny seahorse. I'm going to add a whale shark because that's my wife's favourite fish, and again, obviously that's not going to be to scale because they're absolutely massive, but I like the idea of having like a mini whale shark in a tank this small. It would be like the ultimate marine fish tank if my wife could keep one, just a little mini one like this with a mini whale shark in it. She also loves rays, so I like the idea of making like a manta ray or something like that to go in here. And also because she likes the B-52s, I thought I'd make a little rock lobster. Rock lobster, do 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 do. Make one of those to go in there. I think that would be a nice little touch as well. Okay, hopefully these show up well enough on camera, but yeah, see if you can spot them. I've got the little seahorse there at the front in yellow. He was quite fiddly to make, but good fun and really tiny. And then you've got the little clownfish there swimming in between that coral, like they do in the wild. And then you've got whale shark at the back there. He was obviously the one that was kind of fiddliest because I had to paint him as well to get all those kind of markings on. But I think that looks quite nice. It's quite sort of obviously a whale shark, if not just really tiny. They tend to be quite a bit bigger than a lobster or something like that, but you can see the lobster underneath him there, hiding its orange just below the whale shark. That was fun to make as well. And then we've got the little ray here. What I love about rays is that thing, whenever you see them at aquariums and things where they swim up the side, and you can see their mouth and their gills and things underneath them. So I've done that, and it's quite nice. I've put him on the side there, so he's kind of like you have to turn it to be able to see him properly, but I quite like that. It means you don't see it instantly. I did sort of toy with the idea of putting some aquarium equipment in here, like it was a real marine fish tank, like a sort of a pump and a thermometer and that kind of thing, maybe like a little heater. But I decided against it. I thought it's nicer to leave it sort of semi-natural looking, even though nothing's to scale. It just looks pretty cool as it is, I think. Right, so at this point it was all done basically, apart from adding the resin. So this was the bit that was kind of scaring me the most because all the hard work has been done really. The resin pouring bit is the easy bit, but it's then whether it's going to actually work or not. Okay, so here's the resin that I bought, and you can see you've got part A and part B, and you've got to mix 2 parts of part A to 1 part of part B by weight. So the best way to do this is on a scale. So like if you put this cup on a scale and then set your scale to 0, then say you put in 200 grams of part A, then you'd only put in 100 grams to make it up to 300 grams of part B. As long as you get the ratio right, it'll work. Okay, you can see there I've stirred it. I also added just 1 drop, literally, of blue dye and 1 drop of green dye. And I was hoping to be able to pour this and video it at the same time, but I think it's something I'm not going to risk doing with one hand. So I stopped and I did it with 2 hands and made sure I didn't make a mess. Poured it in. So this is just after it's just been poured in, and you can see there's loads of bubbles, which is inevitable. The bubbles will just come from, you know, all of the corals, all the gaps and things in the corals, and basically they'll come up. Most of them will pop on the surface, and you won't see them again, which is a shame because I love the idea that some of the bubbles would remain because it really gives that sort of underwater look. But I do get quite lucky in that a couple of bubbles do remain, and I'll show you those later after it's set. But it's looking pretty cool already at this stage. Now I've just got to wait and hope for the best. I think just by adding 1 drop of blue and 1 drop of green, really you've got to really stir it up into the mix so that it makes it all really even. But I think that was just the right sort of amount. I didn't want it to be too blue or too green because it would kind of wreck the colours of the coral. I just wanted a little hint of it so it looked more like natural water. I did also have a fair bit of resin left, so I made some little blue spiral things out of Milliput. I already had the spiral bits, they were kind of leftovers from other projects, and I just painted them blue, put them in this little plastic tub, poured the resin in. So when this sets, I might be able to crack off all of the plastic tub and just have this cool kind of cylinder with these blue spirals in. I just thought I might as well do something with the leftover resin rather than just pour it away, would be a shame. Like I say, I do like the idea of making some kind of hideous freak creatures or something in jars as if they're in formaldehyde, maybe tint the water slightly brown or something. Check out those videos in the future if I make them. Right, this is the finished product, and you can see like now the resin is set. If you look, I've been quite lucky in that there are a few little bubbles that have just kind of stopped in sort of like midway up, and they look really quite cool. They do look like more realistic under the water. You can see the top surface didn't dry completely flat, like it went a little bit bumpy. But again, I'm not too fussed with that because it's quite clear, so it still looks like water, but it almost looks like the top of the water is kind of rippled slightly, which is a bit jammy, I think. I think I got lucky there because that was completely by accident. Little ray in the side there. What I really love is the fact that you can still see everything. That slightly panicked me that I would pour it in and it would be too dark and you wouldn't be able to see anything. But I hope you all agree that it does look quite like real water. That's what I was aiming for. And yeah, just a nice little thing to be able to give my wife on her birthday. She definitely deserves it after me making loads of hideous movie monsters over the years and putting up with them being in our space. Right, I decided to shine different lights down through the top so you could see. Obviously, you know, if you were setting this up in a permanent place, you could have like a little lamp over the top. If you wanted it to have, you know, a nighttime effect, you could have a slightly bluey purple kind of light like this. Or just experiment with different lights, and obviously by positioning it in different places you get different effects. one thing I noticed, because the resin doesn't set, completely perfectly smooth all the way through it, if you shine this like I'm doing now, you get this effect of almost like rays coming through the top surface of the water, like rays of light. And that's quite cool. So you could make it so it looks like it's in the daytime, or you could do it so it looks like it's at night time, depending on what lights you put on. That is something to think about if any of you guys are thinking about making one of these or something similar, if you're going to add lighting effects to it at the end. One thing I would recommend is not trying to set any of the light bulbs or anything in the resin, because then if the bulb happens to go in the future, you won't be able to get it out of the resin. It'll be stuck in there. So have every light source outside the resin. There are so many available kind of LED combination lights and things that you can buy really cheaply now. So you could have whatever lighting you wanted on this. And if you weren't particularly pleased with the paint job that you'd done in the first place, just by adding a different coloured light, it'll change the whole look of it anyway. Right, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and even more, I hope that it's inspired some of you to want to try and make something similar. If you do, let me know in the comments. Also, I'd like to thank Milliput for sponsoring this channel. If you guys haven't tried Milliput before, go out and get yourself some, because I'm definitely convinced that once you've tried it, you'll never stop using it. It's such a cool product. Just the fact that it's set so rock hard that it makes anything that you've made pretty indestructible. Plus it has the obvious benefit that it sets at room temperature, so you don't have to cook it in an oven or anything like that. I also use System 3 acrylic paints to paint all of these little corals and things. Hit subscribe to see anything that I post up in the future. Like I say, I mainly make movie creatures, and basically the more obscure the better. I like really weird, unusual creatures, so check those out if you haven't had a chance. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.